All right, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out. So, as part of the Day of Scholarship, I am going to be discussing personal development planning and vertical leadership development. To give you a little idea about myself and my background, I am a long-term Stockton student turned alumni, then professor ultimately. I completed my EDD in organizational leadership here, and ultimately I wanted to dive into a very ongoing and rich and prevalent theme within all areas of our life, which is that the last couple of years have been very tumultuous and challenging for us all, particularly for organizations, and that leaders and organizations and individuals need to find ways to grow and adapt to all these challenges that we face in our daily lives. So to tell you just a little bit more about me, I am an adjunct instructor at the School of Business at Stockton. I am also a dissertation chair in the EDD and Organizational Leadership program. And basically, I am also just somebody that's been involved with Stockton for a while. I got my MBA here, and I got my Bachelor of Arts in Psychology several years ago. Ultimately, my focus of my dissertation was about personal development planning and vertical leadership development. I wanted to find ways in which we could kind of address that issue I mentioned before, that overall, our world today is facing so many unique challenges that present so many situations for leaders to adapt and overcome and respond to all this ongoing change in our world. So one of the terms that I'm going to introduce in my presentation is VUCA. VUCA is an abbreviation for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, and it's been used originally by the U.S. military at the end of the Cold War to describe the current state of global relations, and it's become a term very common in the world of business overall because it relates to a very real aspect of what we all deal with in our current lives and worlds. That we are constantly faced with change, that situations are volatile, where things can change on a moment's notice. We deal with a lot of uncertainty in our lives. As a result, there's a lot of complexity, a lot of multiple perspectives and challenges with everything that we do in our lives. And because our world is increasingly global with more and more perspectives in any situation, we often navigate in ambiguity because there is no right way to solve any situation. Instead, we need to find ways to adapt and grow with everything that we do. We see this in the form of the COVID-19 pandemic. We see this in conversations related to racial inequity and social justice. We see it in ongoing challenges with global relations, with our economy, with the climate, and with the ongoing generation shifts that are happening in our workforce and in our society. And throughout all this tumultuous storms and challenges, we need to find ways that leaders and organizations, above all else, can provide consistency and can provide and adapt to the challenges that our world presents with us. The problem is, though, that although personal development and leadership development theories really do offer a strong pathway to get through all these things, there are a lot of gaps in what is happening currently. Current leadership development programs, despite being almost a $400 billion industry every year, really usually lack a lot of focus. They're not personalized to the needs of the individual. They are often kind of done in a siloed experience where they're not brought into the worker's actual life and are instead feel kind of isolated and separate from a lot of things going on. So our goal in this study is to really find out ways in which we can bring those issues towards a better resolution, towards better understanding leadership development as a whole, and better figuring out ways in which we can help leaders and individuals grow. So that is where the topic of vertical leadership development comes into play. And vertical development is an emerging body of research. It's kind of very frequently something that is kept to high-level management theory, like C-suite executives, as well as like doctorate programs, which is where I was exposed to it in Stockton's EDD and Organizational Leadership program. It is a developmental approach that really seeks to kind of grow the capacity of the individual. So if you think of all the skills and work that we do to grow ourselves as kind of filling our own cup of knowledge and our own experience, vertical development takes it a step further and looks at trying to expand our cup so that we have a greater capacity to manage our own skills, to manage our own challenges that we face in our lives, to better understand the world around us, and ultimately to be better collaborators, better communicators, and better leaders. which that sounds really great in theory. This sounds like a school of thought that really could solve a lot of those issues that are presented in VUCA. However, one of the big issues that exists is that vertical leadership development is an emerging body of research. And because it has been kept kind of in a situation where it's not widely accessible and tested in planned contexts, there isn't really a strong understanding yet of how this all connects and unites to what the average person who's looking to better themselves can do, or what the average leader can do. So that's what our study is seeking to remedy. We are looking to better understand how personal development can serve as a solution to VUCA by finding ways in which plans can work well to give people the skills and understanding that they need to succeed. We are also going to dive into those areas of vertical leadership development to kind of see overall how they connect with personal development planning and ways in which successful plans kind of can mimic and learn from the main principles of vertical development to kind of make those skills and growth a little more accessible to everybody involved. We'll also look at the effectiveness of plans through and through in terms of how they can work to give leaders the skills they need, how they can encourage really meaningful, lasting development, and how they can ultimately be retained and lead to longer and more meaningful growth for people. So to do all that, the conceptual framework that I created was kind of the roadmap to the study itself. And again, we know vertical leadership development has a lot of potential, but it also hasn't really been exposed extensively when it comes to the theoretical practice. So what I did with my conceptual framework was, through the literature review, I identified 5 major themes that were mirrored both in successful personal development plans and in vertical leadership development itself. So the first area, that was the development of application of skills, which is the most natural and base thing that we think of when it comes to personal development. Somebody wants to develop themselves, to learn a new skill, to get better at their job, to receive some type of certification or career advancement, whatever it may be. It's a very common area of what we think of with personal development, but it's also something highly valued in vertical leadership development because people need to find ways to continue to grow and adapt and change as they move forward. The next area was self-awareness, which again is the idea of being conscious of yourself, your actions, your emotions, and how it influences everything around you. Self-awareness really, again, speaks to one of the qualities that makes a strong leader, is being able to be conscious of yourself and how you affect people and what your emotions are doing and how they're guiding you through anything. Which kind of is a good segue into self-efficacy, which was our next point, which ultimately took a strong look at an individual's ability to be the best version of themselves, to use their skills, their resources, their time to the best of their ability, and to be aware of how to use themselves strategically. Self-exploration was also a common theme across both areas, which looked at the concept of understanding what you want to be long-term. Understanding your goals, who you represent in this world, and what you want to accomplish in the future. So these kinds of areas all really drive forward to so many things of what we're talking about with VUCA. The stronger your awareness of self, the stronger your awareness of your own goals, and the stronger you are of understanding how to use yourself more effectively, all speak to a competent, high-performing leader that can adapt to these kinds of challenges in our world. And last, and certainly not least, is the area of continuous improvement, which, I've identified a lot of the challenges that represent VUCA, that represent the complexity of our world right now, but the reality of it is that we are very early on in any situation that I'm describing. And the natural tendency of the world is that complexity is likely to increase. So being able to solve today's problems aren't enough. We need to be able to continue to keep growing and adapting with everything that we do in the future. And that was, again, something that was highly valued in successful personal development plans, as well as vertical leadership development theory. So on to our study itself. So to really dive down and understand these concepts better, we conducted a qualitative narrative-based study with 8 different business leaders across New Jersey, all of which who had self-identified as completing successful personal development plans, and also a group of participants who covered a wide degree of life experiences. There were participants across 6 different organizational contexts, as well as a wide range of age groups and demographic backgrounds, all of which had a different approach and experience with personal development plans. There were some participants, their plan lasted 3 months, other ones lasted 3 years. And some of them created their plans themselves, some used a textbook, some went through a long-term workshop both in their company and outside their company. So overall the goal was to carry a lot of different perspectives and really dive into their experiences. The interview process itself took place over Zoom and really focused on a narrative approach, really figuring out the story of each of these individuals. Who they were before they went through this plan experience, who they were during, what worked in their plan, and what the actual outcomes were overall. And ultimately, the study led to a lot of raw data, as qualitative research often does. There was about 345 pages of transcripts and 142 pages of field notes that I had taken during the interviews, which is a lot. And one of the most tremendous challenges with any qualitative study is capturing all the unique voices and experiences that happen through these plans. And this slide just kind of shows a quote from each participant and what they did specifically and how they ultimately were able to respond to their plan and what it meant to them. So that was a big challenge when you come to the data analysis stage, is saying I have all these rich experiences and all these really unique, nuanced individuals that went through so much and grow in so many ways, but where does it all connect? And in analyzing the data, one of the most worthwhile things was to bring everything full circle back to our conceptual framework and looking specifically at the ways in which those areas all influenced their growth and how present they were in every single area. The development and application of skills was highly relevant and present in everyone's experience, which was what was expected. Most of the individuals were motivated to take on their plan because they wanted to advance their career, or for instance, in the case of a few of them, they also wanted to grow personally in some way or another. And that one thing that was really noteworthy is that when they were asked to evaluate what was the most effective in their plan experience, most participants, 7 out of 8, said that having some type of real-life integration with their work really made something last, which coincided with our literature review that identified that one of the big reasons why personal development plans fail is because of a lack of that real-world integration. So again, we're interviewing people that have had successful plans and are really looking to speak about them and are excited. This isn't to say that 7 out of 8 plans naturally, or any real percentage of that, would represent plans across the board. More often than not, based on the research, is that these kinds of plans are isolated. People go and do their plan and they don't really have a chance to turn around and apply it to the real life, which makes it a lot harder to retain their information. Self-awareness was another key area that came up. As a whole, participants felt that their plan experience had made them more self-aware to some degree. 7 out of 8 participants felt that they gained a greater awareness of themselves, their abilities, and who they were, and how to grow further as a result of their plan. Self-efficacy, again, looked at everyone's ability to manage their skills, their time and resources, and be the best version of themselves that they could. 7 out of 8 participants felt that they were better at managing time and better at managing themselves overall, whereas 5 out of 8 felt more competent throughout everything it was that they do. Self-exploration was another big theme, which again spoke to that idea of being the best you, understanding your goals in the long view, and kind of maintaining a kind of internal compass to get you to where you want to be. And 7 out of 8 participants felt that they had a better understanding of themselves and their goals as they moved forward. And 6 out of 8 participants felt that their plan gave them just a better awareness of their goals and who they wanted to be in the future. Now, continuous improvement, again, was something that really stood out as something positive. One thing that I loved in doing the interview process, and of course during the interviews themselves you have to maintain neutrality, but one of the things that happened very frequently is there was a question in the interview that basically asked, how do you feel since completing your plan? And almost every participant, when asked that question, kind of cut me off and said, well, wait a minute, this individual plan is done, but I'm still growing. I'm still finding some way to move forward, so I don't really even consider that I finished what I started, even though that initial plan is done, that timeline or goal was achieved. So the plans overall, when we look at these successful plan experiences, all lit some type of spark in the individuals to really keep going and find new ways to grow. Some of them sought new plan experiences, others moved into a different career where they could apply new skills and learn new things, and others also just found ways to continue to develop individually in a certain skill set or goal. So overall, the theoretical implications of the study were that we were able to successfully identify some pretty strong links between the world of vertical leadership development and conventional personal development plans. One thing that this study was able to really imply and suggest and led the way for future research is that maybe vertical leadership development as a whole doesn't need to feel so isolated and separate at this high-level leadership development where it kind of lives. Maybe there's principles and practices within vertical leadership development that we can use for a wider degree of plan experiences to make this kind of growth more accessible to a lot more people and a lot more contexts. The plans overall help to better inform how individuals can use personal development plans as a tool to manage VUCA, as a way to deal with all the complexity and challenges of our world and everything that goes in between. As a whole, participants noted that they became more competent and confident as a result of going through their plan experiences. And the research also helped to just better understand the ways in which personal development plans can help an individual to grow and adapt and move forward with the challenges that they're faced with. So practical implications, so theoretical kind of refers to what else can be done in the research sphere, whereas practical implications speak about what can really be done by practitioners out in the world today, essentially. When it comes to developing effective personal development plans, there were a couple common themes that kind of rang true throughout. That plans should be clearly developed and structured. There should be some type of context right at the start to make sure that people know what their goals are. There should be an accountability process where people have specific goals and objectives to answer to, and that essentially plans should be some aspect of somebody's working life. That there should be some type of integration into what they're doing every day so that they can apply those skills and kind of, find ways to use it rather than the current methodology of a lot of personal development plans where they are kind of separate and absent from what everybody else does. Plans should also have a strong degree of sense-making and accountability. And what that essentially means is that although the topic is personal development plans, they should be anything other than isolated and individual based. People should bring other collaborators into the process with them, such as mentors, mentees, peer groups, or peers that can all help to keep them a little accountable, that can give feedback and help people to get a better sense of everything it is that they're doing. And that plans overall should have some type of continuous improvement element in mind. Plans should have some type of set benchmark and a note of completion once it's done, but there should be some type of way to keep that growth growing and to find new ways for the individual to grow beyond that plan experience itself. And overall, organizations who are looking to adapt to VUCA or looking to manage all these challenges can better equip themselves to meet those needs by further ingraining development into their organization's operations and their culture. There's a term that pops up in terms of the literature review that refers to deliberately developmental organizations. Organizations that ingrain the growth of their people in everything that they do, and that is kind of a driving principle. And one thing that is common in that literature review is that these kinds of organizations are so much more agile and so much more equipped to deal with these challenges of VUCA because they are placing such a priority in the growth of all their individuals. That one thing that came up too as a very common theme, a lot of people in the study sought out personal development because they were experiencing some type of heat. Heat representing some type of complex personal challenge or professional challenge that they cannot overcome with what they are faced with. Some people did this as a means to adapt to a new job. Some people did it to retain a job that they already had or find some type of career or personal guidance in their lives overall. So through that, we know that heat is something that tends to be a little scary. When somebody in our team or organization is faced with pressure, it's often an isolated process. But these kinds of heat experiences can really lend the way for greater growth if they're channeled correctly and if there's the right development opportunities to help that individual overcome that heat and kind of grow throughout the process. And overall, organizations that are really looking to manage VUCA can kind of dive into valuing development as a greater priority, but also with an awareness that these kinds of things take time, that growth is slow, and that every individual approaches these things differently, and that the more plans are kind of personalized, the more that they are integrated into a company's culture, and the more that organizations themselves are able to kind of support this growth, the better they can equip themselves, their team, and the organizations as a whole to adapt to the challenges of our world and kind of weather the storms that we all face with VUCA and beyond. So with all that said, I want to thank everybody for coming out, and just wanted to see if there were any questions. Yeah.
So is there a way that you can apply what you just presented to the context of Stockton? Do you feel that Stockton has that ingrained, the professional development?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's something with Stockton in particular that we, being a university, above all else, really do value learning and development to a great level. And there are so many great opportunities for us as faculty or on the staff side also to grow. So it is always something, you know, there is always the topic of continuous improvement, and there is always the idea of any organization approaching these kinds of things differently. So I think, you know, when we look at a university setting like what we have a lot of these opportunities that are natural to us, both on the staff side and faculty, since I've been on one or the other at different times in my career. But towards that end, it's also something that's not necessarily found or valued to the degree that we have here at other organizations. Thanks, that's a good question. Any other thoughts? How'd everybody go? All good? All right, great. Well, I do want to thank everybody for coming out. I do want to mention, you know, my email address is on there also if anybody ever has any questions, wants to discuss these kinds of things further. I'm ongoing doing additional research in this topic, so I always like to be able to talk through these things and find opportunities such as this to share my work. And so I want to, above all else, thank the Day of Scholarship and for Stockton for giving me this opportunity. And thank you, everybody, for coming out today. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
How did you use this development plan for your own development?
That's a good question. So I did kind of bring that through, like my own growth. I've kind of built that structure, you know, like whenever I'm trying to work on something myself, I'm like, all right, well, if I did the research, I've got to back it up myself. So even if it's like minor goals, things I'm looking to learn, I try to go through those steps. I try to make sure that I have those benchmarks and accountability. I try to talk to other people to get those perspectives. And I am a huge fan of reflection in all that process, so I like reflect through everything. So
what do you use? Is it like books or planners or?
Like as far as my method, I'm a little disorganized myself in terms of how I do it, to be honest. I usually just try to start writing things out, like even in a notebook or even just a sheet of paper, just a couple goals, a couple deadlines, and then a couple of mechanisms for how I want to get everything done. But one thing that's kind of come out of this study is that my next goal, like my next paper and everything that I want to do, is say, all right, well, how about actual curriculum for a plan that can integrate this?
Right, because I like it when there's something that guides you through the steps of what you have to do.
Yeah.
So, so you're not by yourself trying to figure all this out.
Exactly. Yeah. It's good to have a compass. So yeah, that's my next goal, is like to develop some type of form of a plan that like would actually give somebody a roadmap. So that's something that I've been kind of working on, understanding some of the other areas of vertical leadership development. That was like the next article I wrote after this one, was like a roadmap for those kinds of things. So it's a work in progress. Someday I'll write a book on it if I get around to it. So. Yeah, but it's a really interesting topic, and I think just so many of these things that pop up that we often feel like, oh, we hear this a lot. It's like, no, well, if they all come together in the right place, everything can really work. So I think that stood out to me for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much.
How does this relate to your own experience, like the overall plan?
So that's a good question for sure, because one of the things that happened with me personally through the doctorate program was that I went through a tremendous deal of growth. I didn't have a lot of experience with leadership when I first started the doctorate program. I had completed my, my MBA, a Master of Business Administration, but I was really kind of seeking for other opportunities to grow. And so much of what I created in this research was about trying to kind of put lightning in a bottle in terms of what worked best for me with my leadership growth and how everything fit in. So I had the accountability and sense-making aspect because I went through my development with a cohort. But my personal development plan was essentially the doctorate program itself, especially the first 2 years of learning to grow and adapt. Okay. Thanks for that.